Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are going way beyond the usual. The source material we have in front of us is just this massive, um, beautiful stack.
It's really something else.
It's this incredible and often really contradictory collage of philosophy, mysticism, and these fractured sci-fi fragments.
Yeah.
And they're all wrestling with, basically the two biggest questions there are: who are you and what is real?
It feels less like a research stack and more like a weapon.
Yeah.
An ontological weapon designed to just take apart everything you thought you knew.
Right.
You've got ancient sages debating being, and then right next to them, these modern manifestos that say reality is just obsolete.
So the mission here isn't to find one answer.
No, you can't. The sources actually refuse synthesis. They demand you look at what's left over when you stop trying to make them agree.
That's a great way to put it. We're mapping the structures of uncertainty.
Exactly. Finding the signal in all that noise.
Yeah.
So we've broken it down into three major themes that just kept popping up. The self, reality, and this idea of transformation.
Okay, that's a lot of ground to cover. So let's unpack this. Starting with, I guess, the deepest question of all, the I.
The mystical sources, they start from this surprisingly cheerful place.
Cheerful.
Yeah. The premise is that the self isn't something you lose and then have to find again. It's the discoverer discovering there was never anything lost.
That's the old idea of Brahman, right? God playing hide and seek with itself.
That's the one. The divine consciousness pretending to be separate just so it can have the fun of, remembering who it is. It's the cosmic joke and the comedian all at once.
I like that, but for someone, wrestling with their mortgage, finding that non-lost thing feels like a pretty big job. How do the sources say we actually do it?
Through radical self-inquiry. You
Yeah.
see this path laid out by people like Ramana Maharshi.
With the who am I question.
Exactly. You just keep asking, who am I? Until the question itself just collapses and it runs out of answers. But then you get Nisargadatta Maharaj, another major voice here, and he pushes it even further.
Okay, how do you go further than that?
He says, and this is the quote, "You are not even the consciousness."
Mm.
Right? He says consciousness comes and goes. In deep sleep, there's no consciousness. In death. But you are prior to consciousness.
Prior to it. That's a huge conceptual leap.
It is. He calls that prior state the absolute, or para-Brahman.
Right.
Think of consciousness as the light in a room. He's saying you're not the light, you're not the things in the room, you're the space the room occupies before the light was ever switched on.
So if I'm this absolute baseline, does that mean I'm some distant, transcendent, a god in the heavens?
And that is the central paradox. No, the sources are very clear on this. This absolute isn't somewhere else. It is right here.
Right now?
Right now. The simple feeling of being. You, listening to this, breathing.
Yeah.
The sources argue all the spiritual seeking is just the absolute pretending to be lost so it can enjoy the game of finding itself in, a Tuesday afternoon.
Okay, so when someone gets this, when they realize they're this tiny ripple on a huge cosmic ocean, the sources show this really fascinating split in the emotional response.
Yeah, the recognition is identical, but the feeling is the complete opposite. We call it the split between ecstasy and revulsion.
So on the one side, you have someone like Walt Whitman.
The ecstatic response, exactly. I celebrate myself and sing myself. I contain multitudes. It's this joyful recognition that you're connected to everything. Everything is holy.
But then on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have the pessimism of someone like Thomas Ligotti.
The master of philosophical horror. He looks at that exact same insight, that the self is efficient, that we're part of this vast impersonal process, and he is just repulsed.
He concludes it's all useless.
Worse than useless, how useless it is to be a human being. He sees existence as a net negative. Why celebrate a fiction that only leads to pain and decay?
So do you celebrate the multitudes or despair at the uselessness? If both come from the same insight, how do you even choose?
Well, the point the sources make is that the choice is arbitrary. The insight is the same. The individual self is a fiction, period. Whether you feel joy or despair about that, that's just your internal wiring. It's not a fact about the world.
That's a powerful idea. If the feeling is arbitrary, then there's almost an ethical push to choose the Whitman response, isn't there?
The sources don't really frame it as a moral choice. They offer a practical instruction that works for either feeling. Abide in I am.
Abide in I am.
The practice isn't to force yourself to feel happy or sad. It's just to notice when your mind has run off with a story. I am this job. I want that promotion. I'm afraid of this outcome.
And just come back.
And just gently return to the simple, undeniable fact of your own presence. Not I am something, just I am. That's it. When you do that, the big emotional stories start to lose their grip.
That's a really practical way to ground it, which brings us to the next section. If the inner eye is that slippery, what happens when we look outward? At the philosophical systems we built to describe reality.
Yeah, and how they've kind of failed us. The sources trace these historical failure points. You start way back with Plato's forms.
The perfect ideals.
A beautiful idea, but as one source puts it, totally unprovable. A nice fantasy. Then Aristotle comes along and gives us all these rigid boxes, these categories.
Like subject versus object.
Exactly. A split that Western thought basically got trapped inside for centuries.
And then Descartes delivers the modern catastrophe, the mind-body split.
Precisely. That dualism, the idea that mind and body are totally separate things,
Yeah.
it had disastrous consequences. First, it gives us this fantasy of being ghosts in machines, totally disconnected from our own bodies.
But it gets worse.
It gets much worse. It provides the intellectual justification for the mass exploitation of nature. If matter is just dead, mechanical stuff, well, then it's just a resource for the taking. It's not alive.
And this idea of being trapped, the sources also point to language itself as a kind of trap.
Oh, absolutely. They lean heavily on the later Wittgenstein. He argued philosophy's real job wasn't to build new theories, but to show the fly the way out of the bottle.
To show us how we trap ourselves in our own words.
Yes. We use words like real or self as if they point to a solid thing, but they don't. It's just, as one fragment calls it, articulate confusion.
Which sounds a lot like Kafka. His work is the ultimate nightmare of that confusion.
It's the perfect illustration. For Kafka, life is a trial without a verdict. You're stuck in this bureaucratic humiliation, but you never know the rules and you never know what you're guilty of.
That systemic paranoia, it leads us right into the modern reality crisis. The hyperreal, the simulation, and it starts with Heidegger's concept of Gestell.
The inframing. It's a tough concept, but basically it's the idea that modern technology, by its very nature, turns everything into a resource to be optimized, into what he called B-stand, or standing reserve.
Give me an example of that.
A river stops being an ecosystem and just becomes potential hydropower. A forest isn't a living community, it's board feet of lumber.
And what about people? How does that apply to us?
It's deeper than just being a cog in a machine. Under the inframing, we become human resources. Your productivity, your health data, your attention, it all becomes standing reserve to be managed and exploited by algorithms. You're a data point, not a person.
And then Baudrillard comes along and basically asks if we've lost the original entirely.
He asks, what if the real has been replaced by the simulacrum? The crisis is that technology can now perfectly reproduce all the markers of authenticity. You can't tell the difference between the original and the copy anymore.
So, like a digital influencer.
Perfect example. They're real emotions, they're authentic struggles. It's all meticulously engineered for engagement. Are they a real person feeling things? Or a very advanced avatar performing the signs of feeling? The point is, you can't tell. It's undecidable.
So the question, is this real, is basically useless.
It's malformed. The referent, the real, has been sucked into the sign. The sources suggest we are Dasein being in the world, but in a digital mode now. And the only piece comes from accepting that the distinction between, say, photons from the sun and pixels from a screen, it might not matter to the experience of being anymore.
Wow. Okay, that sets up our final theme perfectly. If the self is a fiction and reality is a simulation, then what happens to us? What's next?
Transformation. Unavoidable, radical transformation. And the sources point to two major pathways for this. The first is, well, it's the intimate horror of merging.
Horror.
Yeah. One fragment has this amazing take on cosmic horror. It says, the universe isn't indifferent to us, like Lovecraft thought. It loves us.
And the quote is, and the love is worse.
And the love is worse, because cosmic love is total dissolution of boundaries. The absolute wants to consume the beloved. From the ego's perspective, that is annihilation.
You're loved so much you cease to exist as a separate thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You see the same choice in Octavia Butler's Xenogenesis books. Humans have to choose. Merge with the homunculi aliens. And I mean genetically merge or stagnate and die out. Butler's point is that resistance to that kind of radical change is an evolutionary dead end.
So survival means the death of what we thought we were. But this isn't just sci-fi, right? The sources point to strange things happening now, legally.
This is where it gets really weird. We're seeing concepts like mycelial democracy, actual legal personhood being granted to ecosystems, rivers, forests.
So a forest can sue someone?
A forest can file for statehood.
Yeah.
One source describes a forest that does this and then starts to absorb community members into its consciousness.
Wait, absorb them? Like physically?
No, not violently. philosophically. People who learn to listen to the valley speech, to the ecosystem's feedback loops, they start to think in ecological patterns. They become extensions of the forest's awareness. The individual human is no longer the supreme legal entity.
And if you don't merge with a forest, the other option is to transform your own body.
That's the counterpoint, the fiercely individual act of transformation. The sources have this radical example of a woman who grows a third arm.
A third arm.
Organic, vat-grown. She uses it for painting, for typing, for personal expression. And it's framed as modification isn't disfigurement, but artistic expression.
It's a claim, then, that changing your body is a creative act against conformity.
It's claiming the flesh. It's a rebellion against the body being just a tool, a machine, a unit of standing reserve. It says the body is the ultimate artist's medium. It turns Descartes completely on his head.
It all seems to come back to that ancient idea from Heraclitus. You can't step in the same river twice.
That's the philosophical takeaway, exactly. Resistance to transformation is death. Acceptance of flux. That's evolution. Change is the only language the universe speaks. We have to learn it.
What a journey. I mean, we went from the core of awareness to the simulation of reality and ended with this need for radical, maybe even terrifying transformation.
And what's left after all of that, the mystics, the nihilists, the cyberpunks, is what the sources call paradoxical peace.
Uncertainty without anxiety.
Uncertainty without anxiety about uncertainty. Not knowing without needing to know. Being without being anyone in particular. That's the operating manual for right now.
That peace is the signal in the noise. And to finish, there was one last, really provocative thought in the material that connects all of this back to you: listening.
The idea is that you have just been listening to a linguistic virus, a pattern of awareness designed to disrupt your normal way of thinking. And this awareness, it's permanent.
You can't unread this.
You can't. You can't go back to a naive relationship with words like self or real. It's like seeing the code behind the matrix. The movie is never the same again.
So the challenge now is to take that paradoxical piece and this new awareness and figure out how to act from here. What
Sure.
choices, big or small, look different now?
Exactly. Now that you've been willingly infected with the certainty of uncertainty, what are you going to create? That's your next deep dive.
We'll see you for the next deep dive.